Welcome. I've created a series of open channel flow animations that I'd like to share with you. This animation shows transient changes in flow conditions behind an instantaneous step. If you've watched my other videos, you may have been bothered that the things that I vary, things like channel width or instantaneous constrictions in the flow or varying slope, these things don't really vary in the real world. And you'd be right. I would argue that this video is different in that way. In this video, there's an instantaneous step that appears 5 hours into the simulation. And so the source of this instantaneous step, if this were a real-world situation, might be a tree falling into the channel and landing across the channel bottom, instantaneously creating a step where the tree trunk is covering the channel bottom. That's the situation I'd like you to imagine in this video. Before we get started, let's look at the different parts of the figure that we'll be watching the animation in. This upper figure here is a side view of the channel itself. The initial depth is a little bit less than 3 feet. This dashed figure here is where the step will be. It's dashed because it doesn't yet exist. It will come into existence at 5 hours. The 3 lower graphs show different parts of the transient behavior. This leftmost graph shows the relationship between depth and volume. So I want you to imagine that there's basically, in essence, a pool that will grow behind this step. The water will pool behind this step, eventually overcoming the obstacle that this fallen tree or this instantaneous step represents. This middle graph shows the changes in discharge with time. Initially, the discharge is 100 cubic feet per second. The instant that that tree falls into the channel, it represents a choke, and in fact, not all the water that was flowing is able to get past the tree. Some water will stay behind, and because of that, the flow depth will increase. And so that will be a transient that over time, again, approaches steady state conditions of 100 CFS. Finally, we have our energy depth or EY diagram, and at least initially, we start at this blue dot, and you'll see that when the tree falls or the step appears, the flow is much less, so we'll be on a different EY diagram, and you'll see a family of EY diagrams slowly converging back to the one that we have, and eventually we're going to reach this green dot, which is the amount of energy we need to back up, to overcome the step, and return to that steady state discharge of 100 CFS. Let's put this animation in motion. So we're just trucking along there. The step has happened, and we're now on the transient. Let's look at this. So the step now exists, so you can see it exists with solid lines. The red dashed line shows the initial discharge at the instant that the step appeared. The green represents the steady state that we need to get back to in order to completely overcome the step. And the solid blue line represents where we are now. And these themes are going to be played out in the figures below. The instant the step appeared, we were down here. We are now, very quickly, in just a few hours, we've gained depth and therefore discharge behind the step. Still, we're headed for this green spot. Here you can see that the discharge is starting to recover. We're up to just beyond 60 CFS. And here, this cyan curve represents the discharge in the channel for the discharge. I'm sorry, represents the EY diagram in the channel for the discharge that we have. And at least as we go over the step, we're at critical conditions. So that's this point here. And so that's, you can see as I stopped it, it's about 1 foot. So the depth of flow here is about 1 foot. The step is 2 feet high. So yeah, that looks about right. Let's let this play forward a little bit more, and I'll stop it again. You can see that there's some curvature, so we're approaching steady state, but there's sort of we're going to approach it slower and slower as we get closer to steady state conditions. We've gained depth. You can see that the blue curve is closer to the dashed green curve, and you can see that the EY diagram that corresponds to the current discharge, which is about 80 CFS, is now getting closer to the 100 CFS case. And I didn't mention it before, but you can see the delta Z represented here. These are the conditions downstream of the step, how much energy we'll have once we get to the other side. Let's let this play through to completion. And you can see that it gets slower and slower as we start to converge to steady state conditions. There at about roughly 40-45 hours, we finally reach steady state conditions. So there's been a buildup of volume represented here behind the step. You can see our transient return back to steady state discharge of 100 CFS. And at our final conditions, you can see that we're at a depth of, I don't know, about 1.5 feet. So that's the 2 feet of the step plus 1.5 feet. That looks about right to be about 3.5 feet as we go over the step. And then once we clear the step, it's like the other step animation that you've seen. Both subcritical and supercritical flow are accessible downstream and will depend on other conditions downstream. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Also, you can click the link in the description to watch the other videos explaining concepts from my book. Thank you very much for your attention.